Welcome to On the Clock, a collaboration between the Pack-A-Day Podcast and the Draft Fellows. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows. Together, we are the Draft Fellows, and leading up to the draft, we'll be doing a series that covers picks 1 through 32, each team's biggest needs and who they should be considering at their pick. You can also check out the video of all 32 episodes on the Draft Fellows channel on YouTube, and you can check out the audio versions on the Pack-A-Day Podcast. We want to go back and see our first 18 episodes, but we are on to pick 19 in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers today.
Yeah, I was laid back in my chair a little bit, relaxing, and Andrew brought the energy in the intro and kind of freaked me out a little bit there. But we are ready to continue in this series. It's been a lot of fun just getting to know these teams a little bit better as a way to prepare for the draft. And we are on to 19. Tampa Bay is on the clock here, and we're just going to work through. This is a team that has a lot of needs. And so there's a couple different ways that they could go with things here. They could go edge, linebacker, defensive back. After striking gold with Bucky Irving and re-signing Chris Godwin, it kind of feels like the priority is probably on the defensive side of the ball. They could use help at edge and linebacker. They brought in Hassan Reddick to help Yaya Diaby at edge. But is that enough? I think that's the question. They could look to add someone else to the edge group. And then Levante David is kind of that ageless wonder player, but he could use some help beside him at linebacker, as well as someone who could end up being the future there at linebacker. They got a lot out of Zion McCollum rather at corner last year, and Jamil Dean was okay, but they could definitely upgrade the cornerback position, and they could also look to pair someone with Antoine Winfield so that there's another impact safety on the back end of this defense. So lots of different directions they could go. I tend to think that it ends up being on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and you and I were talking right before we hit record that this is a team that, even though they're picking 19, doesn't have a ton of perceived needs, and they really are kind of focused on the defensive side of the ball. So this is one of those rare teams I could see moving up aggressively if there's an edge that slips a little. Let's say somebody like Shamar Stewart, or if somebody like cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan slides. Maybe the Buccaneers would be willing to move up a little bit to grab one of those premium players because they don't have as many perceived needs. So some of the options, if they do end up sticking at 19, some edges like Mike Green out of Marshall, Donovan Ezerico out of Boston College, Michael Williams out of Georgia, linebacker Jihad Campbell out of Alabama, and then a bunch of cornerbacks: Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky, Trey Amos from Ole Miss, Darian Porter from Iowa State, Siobhan Revel, Benjamin Morrison, Jahdae Barron, all names that could be had here. And especially you talked about that need at cornerback. And safety Malachi Starks out of Georgia, I think, could be a fun fit here. So you'll notice all the players I mentioned really focus on defense. I don't think this is the team that needs to address offensive line, but that is something that Tampa Bay has done relatively recently as well. And so, beefing up your offensive line for a team that we expect to be in serious contention for a playoff spot, always a good idea.
Yeah, never a bad idea to add to the offensive front. And after this conversation, I'm sure they will decide to throw resources at offensive line because that's what we talked about the least. But I think that Will Johnson is probably gone if we kind of start to talk about what players they should actually target in this range. But Johnson is probably gone. And with Tyke Smith playing well in the slot for them last year, I think Jahdae Barron might not be the best fit here just because of kind of his versatility of playing inside a little bit. I kind of like Jihad Campbell here. Levante David isn't getting any younger, and Tampa has always prioritized that linebacker position. Campbell gives them an elite linebacker athlete who can give them something as a rusher as well, get after the quarterback a little bit. They could also go with a more traditional edge rusher and someone like Mike Green that you mentioned, or James Pierce Jr., another name that we haven't mentioned a lot, but probably is, someone who's going to be selected in this range in the first round. But both Mike Green and James Pierce Jr., both natural pass rushers. And when you mix them in with guys like Yaya Diaby and Hassan Reddick, you start to feel pretty good about the pass rush that you're going to be able to produce in the coming season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are really great options. There's just something weird. I got it stuck in my head as I was going through the list of players available. Trey Amos and Darian Porter just seem like such ideal fits for this Tampa Bay defense. They've had a ton of success with big physical corners. Even though they don't typically draft them super high, I think Amos and Porter have skill sets that are super unique and would help elevate this secondary to complement the rest of the team. And I think could be true difference makers on this defense in helping them to get as competitive as their offense has been, and really make this a not just serious contender in this division, which we certainly expect, but also in the NFC as a whole.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's going to be really fascinating to see how these corners shake out as far as the order that they come off the board, because I think we're talking about Will Johnson. We're talking about, of course, the guys at the very top of this class today, Barron. Once you get past those guys, there's kind of like this group that I feel like could go anywhere from here to like that mid to late second round. And we're talking about
Yeah.
them here. Trey Amos is in that mix. Darian Porter is a player not a lot of people are talking about, but you and I both like a lot. They could go, yeah, like first round, or they could be like maybe even sneak into that third round. So I think ordering those guys, especially with a lot of the injuries, a lot of that cornerback position has in this class is going to be fascinating. But I think that we might just see Tampa take one of those corners off the board when we get to the end of April. So just gotta see what happens when we get to Tampa Bay, because there's a lot of different directions they could go with it. Probably on the defensive side of the ball, unless they want to spurn us and go ahead and take that offensive lineman that we talked about. But thanks for joining us for another round of On the Clock. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show and stick with us as we preview all 32 teams in this series leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.